Hey, it's Cash. If you watched my previous short a few days ago, then you heard me mention this build briefly. It was contesting Apocalypse in the pre-test version for my top build spot, but I wanted it to be perfect before making a full video. I've been partnering up with Gazi TV on Warlock, and ever since he mentioned this build on his stream a while ago, I've begun to see versions of it popping up, and although they are close, either something is missing or just off. I'm delivering a deep dive on the build while showing off a little bit of gameplay from the current live version. However, keep in mind, my current gear is crap as I haven't been able to play as much as I would like, but on the pre-test where I did the majority of my creation of this build, that was not the case. I was able to push a T120 with ease before having to move on to other builds before the testing ended, but this build is easily fighting for the number 1 or 2 spot of Warlock builds. I'll put timestamps somewhere and a link to the build on the Icy Veins website. But for now, welcome to Infinistep. Moving on to the gear and the skills and whatnot, first up we have the Air Pair Edition. This is mainly for the multiplier, but it also has critical strike chance, which helps us fill out the rest of our crit requirements. If you don't have this yet, then you'll go with the Godslayer Crown or the Crown of Lucian. For rune words, we have Spiritborn Vortex. Warlock doesn't really have that great of a pull. Even with Dark Prison, Tyrant's Grasp is pretty solid, but we don't use that. It costs Dominus, it's expensive. And it just kind of slows things down, so we automate it with the Spiritborn Vortex. Going on the chess piece, Willpower, Maximum Life are your two most important. Willpower would probably be the number one, and then beyond that, you just kind of want defensive stats, armor, physical resistance, any kind of elemental resistance. If you're aiming for an element resistance, I would recommend Lightning or Fire. Those are the two enemy affixes that tend to hit absurdly strongly. Poison's a short third, but it does still hit decently hard. For the aspect, I've got a generic damage increase here. This is nice, but it can be switched out. You don't want to go with Heavenly Strength right now. It's not giving its damage reduction, so even though that would be our big boy damage reduction, it doesn't work right now. It's not giving it. So avoid that. Go with this. On your gloves, like I said, my gear sucks right now, but I did test a lot and I know it's supposed to be there, and everything on the written guide will be correct. So take this with a grain of salt and take the written guide to heart. Doing my best, guys. I'm trying to play as much as I can and make things, but time is limited and it has just been chaos. But I wanted to get this out for you guys because I've had it for a few weeks now since testing, and it's fine-tuned now. Anyway, back to the gloves. Willpower, and there's just going to be a bunch of multipliers on it. We really don't need a ton of defensive stats with this build because we're going to be immune for 95% of the time. We only really need to survive for 2 to 3 seconds here and there. And odds are, unless you're standing right in the middle of an entire mosh pit, you can take a little tick from Little Lightning Ball going forward because of the maximum life and just our natural defenses we get. Going on to the pants, same thing. Defensive stats. Lightning resist, lightning or fire, or poison. If you have the option, willpower maximum life would be the ideal. Aspect-wise, maximum shadow form stacks. And the reason is there are moments when we burn through shadow form stacks very quickly, and it's very common to run out of shadow form stacks if you're not running this. But with this, even though it's only 6 once I actually have the maxed out 1, it does make a big difference. And when we're out of shadow form stacks, we're very vulnerable and our damage takes a hit, so you don't want that to happen. Maximum shadow form stacks. Again, immune most of the time, don't really need a defensive here. Onto the boots. What you want for this to be able to just have Nether Step completely when you're not refreshing things is maximum evade charges. I think that's what it's called. Maximum evade charges. That would take over whatever, my life resistance, cold resistance. Ideally, it'd be something like willpower, maximum life, movement speed, evade charges. And then, now that we're on the topic of evade, the reason we have evade on our bars is because when we hit evade, we can't cancel it unless Nether Step is on our bars. And that's really important in a few moments when you need to just kind of pop out and pop in. You know, you just need to go immune for a second, reposition, and you need to refresh your buffs. So we have it on our bars, and then we can actually cancel it. Going towards the weapon, there's not really a normal unique that is nearly as strong as a normal, just legendary aspect weapon. Mythic uniques have fixed stats, they can't be random, and there are simply too many powerful affixes we can get on normal gear now, particularly weapon damage. Weapon damage adds a huge amount of damage overall, and it's definitely the most important. That's why I have it masterworked here, and I got lucky and found a GI on that. which isn't as hard as you would think to find, truthfully, with the Tree of Whispers and everything else the war plans. Damage-wise, it would be willpower, critical strike damage, and then it would be maximum life or shadow damage. Whichever one you find, it'll be okay. Maximum life, actually, it does add a little bit of damage because of one of our demon form nodes later, or metamorphosis nodes. And then for the temper, you want critical strike chance. That's going to be the final little piece that rounds out our crit, so we're always critting. And you'll notice that there's no attack speed in the build, and that's because in my testing, and I sat there for a long time and just counted the amount of times our Sentinel and our Blazing Scream was ticking, it doesn't seem to be affecting it right now. So even if you get 100% attack speed, you're not going to get more Profane Sentinel Blast. It just doesn't do anything. So critical strike chance. And then we have Insidious on here, 150 times. It should be 160. Enemies who have not hit you in the last few seconds, we're not really going to be getting hit, so we get that. Now, there is something that is stronger in very specific scenarios. If you are strictly pit pushing, you're going for leaderboard, whatever, and you need more damage, you're going to want this, Overwhelming, but it only is going to activate when you're fighting elites. And that's the problem for general usage. If you're not just pit pushing, it's really going to slow you down. But if you have a set for just bosses or for just pit pushes, then this would be your go-to on a weapon, because the multiplier it gets is insanely strong. But if you do that, it's going to require to change the build a little bit. Right there. It's going to be a Malevolence. You take this, that's going to be your overpower generation, and then Overwhelming is going to be activated all the time. It also means that this, your Dark Prison, wouldn't be on your bars. It would be Command Fallen. So two kind of versions of this build. One for a very specific scenario. You can get past this without using Command Fallen. It would require a little bit of generation elsewhere, but Command Fallen is a solid choice, and it is the most consistent and easiest, so I would recommend putting this here, and then getting Dark Prison from your rune word here, which right now I have cooldown reduction. This could also be the Barbarian Berserk, gives you damage increase, that's really solid. But the cooldown reduction is nice because we get a big damage boost from being a Metamorphosis. Moving on to the neck, we're going with just a regular amulet here. There is the Seeds of Horrors on, and it's a good, unique, but it does require more planning and more setup and adjustments and things, because we would need to not only get the Paragon with increased wrath and focus on increasing our wrath as much as possible, we would also need to masterwork maximum resource on what we can. And it would have to go into our neck, which is taking away a damage multiplier on its own. And it's just not worth it in the long run. It ends up becoming a loss. Hellbolt Commander, as it is, it's 105. That's pretty solid, truth be told. All these stats are pretty much wrong. You're going to want just straight offensive crit damage multi, vuln damage multi, shadow damage multi. Full glass cannon. That's one of the powers with this build is, since we are immune for most of the game, we can go full glass, and that's awesome. Same thing with the rings. This ring is not bad that I have. I would like to switch out the maximum life for just more another damage multi, all damage, something like that, or shadow damage. This one's not bad. When you masterwork, you're gonna probably want to end up hitting critical strike damage multi. But this gives you a better idea of what you want with the build. I have Demonic here, 65 times. I might switch that out. Like I said, on the guide, those will be correct. But for now, I've settled with this. Going on to the unique ring, and this is the one that kind of puts everything together. It gives Profane Sentinel a pretty massive multiplier, and you can see here, this is what I mean. Some of my gear is decent, and some of it is complete garbage. Like this one here, it's an 850, life on kill. I've already done Pit 100 with this. I'm actually doing it pretty consistently, and I'm speed running T10s and T11s. So once you get proper gear, if you actually farm out really good gear with the best stats, whatever, this build is not only going to be extremely safe, it hits like a truck. And it was already hitting like a truck in testing when I was originally coming up with this build. But I wanted to give some tips and tricks with this thing. When you throw Profane Sentinel, you'll see you get a little eye here. That's from the ring. It actually has something of a range, so if you go too far, it's going to stop shooting. So when you're nether stepping around things, and it just fell off, thank you. When you're nether stepping, you want to kind of stay circling around the group so that the little eye is also blasting, and then when you pop out, just make sure you don't pop out in the middle of the blob. Make sure you're popping out safe in a safe spot before reactivating. But when you reactivate it, and obviously I just resummoned it there, but when you reactivate it, the eye actually comes back. And that's something you're going to be doing naturally anyway, is redirecting, because your main targets are going to die, and you just want to like put it onto something else. So this is something that just kind of comes naturally with the gameplay. Moving on to talismans, we're going with the Shadows of Harash here. The Chains of Horizon is solid, but it does end up coming out to less damage, and it's a pretty significant amount of damage you're losing. There are some bonuses here, mainly Warlock with the increased dominance generation, and I'll get to that in the skills, why it doesn't matter, but that is kind of the most solid thing. Also with Shadow here, on the 3 set, you have Sigil of Subversion. You can see that it leaves shadow trails behind you from Sigil. Those actually keep the modifiers from Sigil of Subversion, which is really, really nice, and means that we don't have to have Sigil of Subversion on our bars. In terms of stats on it, you can see here, I have Abyss skills. Anything that is on these tags, Demonology, Abyss, I don't think you can get Summon. Abyss skills or Demonology skills, those are your main ones you want to focus on. One or the other, as long as it's got the tag and it's complementing these and it's giving Blazing Scream and Profane Sentinel ranks, that's what you want. Other stats, see if I have something here. Other stats you would want some kind of defensive stat to go along with the ranks, or all stats. All slots would be ideal, but defensive stats are solid too. And if you get something with like gold drop rate, whatever, that's fine. And if you're pitching really hard pit, then obviously you want the perfect, and all stats would probably be the perfect, and then defensives. On the seal, you're going to want crit damage multi. I don't have that. I've got this. First things first, you want all of your slots open. So get something with that, and then get something. You can see below the attack speed there, it has the set piece rank, and right on the name list, I believe that's this one, yeah. Those actually go with the set piece, so you want something with Shadow of Harash on there. That's in an ideal world. That's what you want. Soul Shards, Mastermind, we're doing Shadow. You get Command Lawlish, Blasphemous, Recast goes to play Hex. Almost our main things are all recast. Blazing Screams recast. Profane Sentinels recast. Is Lawlish? No. Abilities, skill tree. I have Command Fallen here. I tend to switch back and forth between the Command Fallen version and just the other one. If you use Command Fallen, it does mean that you're going to have to be out another step a little longer. The easiest way to do it is when you first start something, you just summon them out and then you do everything else. But if you don't want to mess with that, then you can just switch it out and put Dark Prison on there. If you're using Command Fallen, then you're going to want to put the rune that gives you Warlock Dark Prison on your rune words instead of whatever you decide to go with for your secondary, either cooldown reduction or Barbarian Berserk. Back to the skill tree. When we done the Blazing Abyss, we do a Blazing Abyss, Abyss variants, Multiplier here, multiplier here. Now, since on the Chains of Horizon, the 2 set here, it says enemies are dominated, what's going to happen is when you set out Blazing Abyss, because that's got to be our first recast ability out, things are going to start slowly walking towards it. So it's kind of like a Timu pull, but it ain't going to do a whole lot. So don't expect it to be Necromancer 10 rules, but it is there. And Blazing Stream on its own actually does pretty solid damage. Now, sadly, this is a bug that has persisted since the test. If you're fighting things in a tight corridor and they're near a wall, and you notice, like, hey, this isn't dying, that's the bug. For some reason, whenever enemies get too close to the wall and you have Blazing Scream on them, it doesn't register that Blazing Scream's there and it's not doing any damage. And the fix for that is to get the mobs away from the wall a little bit, either go to something else or just run away, and then get it a little bit more open and try again. And you'll notice it pretty quick if Blazing Scream's actually doing its damage. Going down Nether Step, obviously Corpora build, it's Infinistep. This is the most important node to make a choice on. If you have the evade charges on your boots, then you're not going to need it, but if you don't, then you're probably going to want to take this. Nether Step gains an extra charge. Okay, because if you don't, then you're not going to have Nether Step available to be just constantly going. And then Gloomwalker here is what makes us immune for the whole time, and it kind of what makes the whole build, a thing. And then down here, movement speed bonus, lasts 50% longer. That coincides with this, the damage reduction. Once you have the evade charges, then you would go with this, and you get a pretty good amount of damage reduction from it too. And I'll give you kind of an idea here of what this looks like in action. So I've got the Dark Prison variant without the Command Fallen. You'd put that out, you'd run up, Command Lawlush. I tend to put Command Lawlush on myself when I'm first starting, but you have to. You can also open with just pressing Metamorphosis when you're first going in. Try not to do it too early. But then Blazing Scream, Sentinel, and then Metamorphosis, immediately Nether Step, and then you just stay in Nether Step, and all you have to do from that point is make sure Blazing Scream and Profane Sentinel are active. So you want to pop out, activate them, back another step. Every 10 seconds, pop up, just redirect, so you get the little eye from this, and you go right back to it. And that's pretty much it. Like I said, it's very passive, very things like that, but that is the idea, and that is also the reason why we want the evade charges on here, so that we can just sit in Nether Step almost all the time. And I did say this once, but when you're coming out of Nether Step, just glance down when it's about to end. Make sure you just pop out in a safe spot for a second. Nether Step, duration's getting over, come out, pop things, right back in Nether Step, and then continue. And don't mind the damage numbers here. Once you actually get proper gear and you're not in monkey gear like me, this build goes into the trillions and maybe even the quads pretty quickly. I did hit a few crits on the quads in the test, but in this version, like I said, even with my prep gear, I'm already in T10. I'm 173 Paragon. Already in T10, already cleared Pit 100, and I'm farming Pit 100 when I need to with war plans. This build's crazy. Going on to Profane Sentinel. Now this is quite important because I'm starting to see this build pop up in places, and they're using this, the multiple eyes. Theoretically, this does do more damage. However, it makes it so you have to be a lot more active with your summon, and also it drains your dominance. That's bad because one of the largest multipliers the Necromancer has is right here in Dynamism. Dynamism, that's right. While a demon form, your demonology skill damage is increased by 3% for every point of dominance you currently have. And you can see we have 40, and some quick maths here. There's 120 times damage multiplier. I mean, that's a lot of damage, and you will notice that, we're just sitting here outside of demon form, and then we pop it, and the numbers go boom. It is a massive difference, and taking the multiple sentries makes the build a lot more vulnerable, as I said, because you have to constantly be popping out and you have to be placing them. Also, the multiple versions with Profane Sentinel, I'll just show you here. Profane Sentinel, let's do it like this. Click on the skill tree, do the multiples. I put Profane Sentinel down, set it over here, and ain't doing nothing. Now let's switch. Go to the other one. Did I take the other one? Yes, I did. Go to the other one, set it down, redirect it, and that thing will hit from across the map. That is a massive deal, and it's also one of the reasons why we're able to sit in Netherstep through Gloomwalker instead of having to take this to recall things. Because Blazing Abyss, we can just summon that out and it does its thing. Profane Eye, that ain't moving unless we take this in Netherstep. But that also means that it's no more Infinistep anymore. You have to be hitting this to move things. And that's bad. You'd rather sit immune for 90 whatever percent of the time of your gameplay and just not have to worry about anything, including the sword and all the lightning crap and all the ground effects that are going on right now, one-shotting people. You don't have to worry about that anymore. Whereas with this way, you take this, and Netherstep is just zip, I'm out. I'm vulnerable. So that is the main reason. This, originally I thought this was the way to go back when I was first conceptualizing this build and putting things together, but it's just not. It ends up being worse. It makes you a lot more vulnerable. It does less damage because not being able to redirect actually really sucks, because what's going to happen is, yeah, you have all these things out and they're doing more damage because there's more of them, obviously, but guess what? That sentry, it's hitting on a normal imp. It's not hitting the elite that's running you down or messing things up or sending all this crap everywhere. Not being able to redirect's really bad. Anyway, going on to the modifiers. If you're hardcore pit pushing, Narrow Blast would be the way, but if you're just playing the game normally, doing anything, you just want to make the beam larger, because Profane Sentinel is pretty 50-50 with our damage source with Blazing Scream, and you'll notice that your clear speed is a lot worse when you take this, because the beam will only hit like 2 things, whereas with this, once things get sucked in with our Spiritborn Vortex, it's gonna cleave most of the wave. Up here, there's really only one choice. 30 times damage increase when only hitting a single target. That's really solid. Lesser Demon Vulnerable. Doesn't really do much. We have like 3 sources of vulnerable in this build, so it doesn't matter. I will say, there is another version of this build with this, and it means losing dynamism in that big multiplier that is attached to it. It ends up with strictly bosses where the thing is not moving and is just them. It can burst down slightly faster, but in my testing, it's very minimal, the difference. But what you lose by doing this is just not worth it. I put a video attached to this with Zira, and you can see just how fast Zira dies even without Sentry on T10, and that's where most people are gonna be farming. There's really no reason to be in T12 unless you just want the little bit extra experience. And with proper gear, you can speedrun T12 just as easily as I've shown here in T10. It's just my gear is crap, but in test it was not crap and doing well. Sigil of Subversion, we went over this already. Comes from our talisman, the trails. Going to our ultimate, Metamorphosis. This is a massive generator of shadow form stacks, but the big reason here is in our Paragon node, this is our daemon form, and it's giving us a huge multiplier in terms of points. Some points will go in the Dark Prison. If you have it as a rune word, then it doesn't matter. But if you're putting it on your bars, Then you're going to want a few points here. Metamorphosis points into it. It doesn't do a whole lot. Otherwise, you could put it in Command Fallen if you're doing Command Fallen. This also has another damage increase attached to it. Every 1,000 bonus maximum life, you get 1% extra damage increase, which is not massive, but it does add up. Metamorphosis reduces your dominance cost. At this point, we don't really have crazy dominance points because all you have to do is spend it on Profane Sentinel. It does help, and it does help us get back to maximum Wrath, our dominance quicker. But the big thing here is the other option is just kind of bad. So we don't do that. And then just quickly to go over the Paragon board. I'm not going to go super in-depth in this because, one, the Paragon board is just not that complicated. And it's not a whole lot to say. Destruction Glyph, damage increase, all this stuff is just boosting our damage. So we'll focus mainly on the nodes. Demonic Spectacles, we just went over that. Another big damage multiplier. Dominion. The Wrath cost reduction here doesn't really matter. It's mainly here for the multiplier. Also, this board has maximum dominance, which is very important for dynamism, which is for our metamorphosis. We get a big damage increase here, a big damage increase, and it's really nice. The damage generation is also nice too in the moments we're not in. And then over here, another big damage multiplier. Gives us some damage reduction too. But nothing too fancy here. Overall, in the guide, I'll have a lower level version of the board and then the every point spent. Mercenaries, this would be right here. I took him off because he was annoying me before I decided just to turn this on level altogether. But this would be right here. But for now, that's pretty much it. Like I said, in live right now, my gear's not great. I haven't had a ton of time to play. But still a decent amount, and I'm sure there's going to be some casual players looking at this going, oh, well, he's already 173. Like, that's a lot of playtime, and it is, but for somebody who does this for a living, it's not that much. But I did get to play this a lot in testing, and that was primarily where I came up with all the builds we have up right now and things like that, and this is just the fine-tuned version of it, and I wanted to get this build out before it gets too late, and then, everybody's already got it up. Right now, this, in my opinion, is the best version of this build. It is one of the safest builds in the entire game, if not the safest, because you can sit in Nether Step outside of... I don't know what Paladin's doing. If they're going full immune and just straight up not taking damage, then, well, I did my best. But this, you're just straight immune for 90-something% of your gameplay. But if you enjoyed this video, if you watched this long, thank you. Consider leaving me a like, subscribe. The guide is up on Icy Veins, as is all of our other endgame guides that I also made. All of them I tested in Pit T100, some of them more. This one in the test, I think I was at Pit 120 before I had to stop and work on other things. So around the same place Apocalypse was. In terms of, is this better than Apocalypse? I think Apocalypse might have a higher damage cap than this, but this one's also significantly safer, and at least on tests, the problem that was being hit was not damage, but survivability. And this one, since you're immune, that could theoretically give it a higher cap. We'll have to see. But thanks guys, thanks for checking it out, and check the description for links to everything. And this was Cashlarond, out. Repair edition, mainly for the multiplier, but it also has critical strike chance on it, and that is going to want to be